Hello and welcome to Tintincast episode 8, King Ottokar's Sceptre.
8.
Indeed, yes. So for everyone who's been reading along with us, thank you so much. Thanks for your messages. We're a third of the way through after this one. So yes, this is the last book with Tintin as a solo artiste. And we're waiting for the big reveal on the next episode with a very important guest joining the cast of Tintin, but we'll look forward to that. So this week we have a slightly more political outing than the last one. The last time Tintin was getting on a breakaway to the Scottish Hebrides and putting behind him all of the worries about World War II, the impending war. But this book is squarely placed back in the fray because it's the late 1930s, the world's in turmoil, of course, as Hitler's poised to invade. Belgium's trying to keep a neutral stance in all of this at the moment. But on 11th of March 1938, the German troops invade Austria, and Hitler announces that the country is now part of the Third Reich. And this is the backdrop, really, to Hergé starting to publish what is called Tintin's Adventures in Syldavia in Le Petit 21. And that starts being serialized in August 1938. The following month, the Nazis invade Czechoslovakia. At that time, Hergé is getting concerned about being called up for military service. And fortunately, he isn't, so he's free to continue on this wonderful book. So the dates, this was published in black and white as a book with Casterman in 1939 and colorized in 1947. And the English translation there, I think, was about 10 years later in 1958. So what do you think, Miles?
King Ottokar's Sceptre. Yes, it's one that I didn't know as well, but thoroughly enjoyed this one because it starts. By this point, Hergé has just totally nailed the plot, the character, the themes, the vibe of Tintin, which he did, a few books back. Obviously, Black Island previous week was one of my favorites just because it's a personal favorite. But King Ottokar's Sceptre is almost like a best of the previous few because it's got everything that they've got. It's got the chases, it's got all the different vehicles, it's got loads of characters, loads of comedy characters, loads of bad guys. It's got political intrigue, it's got mystery, it's got detection, it's got sort of ingenious stuff, it's got comedy, and it's so confident at this point that where you could say Black Island is a bit of a side adventure, King Ottokar's Sceptre is one of the important ones, I think, because like you say, it takes place and it was released just before World War II, which is obviously an enormous world-changing war. And it is about the rise of the Nazis, and it is Hergé directly addressing the rise of the Nazis. He has the bad guy, the main dictator is an amalgam of Hitler and Mussolini called Musla. So it's very,
I think it should have been called Hitolini.
Hitolini, that would be good, yeah. Hey, it's Hitolini. Yeah, it is a sort of, like you could say, Cigars of the Pharaoh is a very fun mystery adventure. Tintin the Broken Ear is a fun mystery adventure. The Black Island is a fun escapist adventure, very comic in tone. King Ottokar is kind of all those things rolled into one. And again, beautifully illustrated. It's got some real show-stopping panels where it stops to show you the history of Syldavia and which is the sort of fictional, isn't it Transylvania, and where else is it that he mixed together?
Oh yeah, is it Moldavia?
That's it. Into this fictional but very recognizable state that's in turmoil. And it's actually a lot, the Tintin movie that Spielberg and Peter Jackson did is a bit like this in tone. It has Bianca Castafiore in it as a bit of a diversion. Again, it's kind of got everything in it. There's, before we're talking pre-Haddock here, pre-Captain Haddock. it's kind of got everything you go to Tintin for, and it definitely doesn't. There's no dip in quality or enjoyment. It's got a lot of what made the previous 7 books enjoyable. And it's got the Thompsons in it, who are very, very funny indeed in this, particularly twittish. There's some great stuff with Snowy. There's a recurring theme with the bone, which Hergé uses at least 4 times to the story's advantage, which is very clever. There's mistaken identity. It's a very, very strong one, isn't it?
It is. The Thompsons, I think this is the first book actually that the Thompsons don't want to arrest Tintin. They become friends by this point.
They are, although I love the bit like when there's, Tintin's accidentally smashed a vase with his own window because, he had an intruder, and the Thompsons come in and they're sort of grabbing Tintin by the arm and going, well, there's evidence of a struggle. And he's like, no, I opened the window and I'm not. So they're trying to be detectives. I love the fact that at one point when they come back into the story, there's this massive crash and Tintin goes, oh yeah, I think I know who that is. And it's the Thompsons. They're such utter idiots in this. It's brilliant. They have some classic Thompsons moments, just falling over each other and slipping, and their hats, the recurring thing with their hats that need replacing, and when they're trying to throw the sceptre out the window and it keeps hitting them in the head and ruining their hats and stuff. It's just some great slapstick. They blow themselves up at one point with a bomb that was meant to be in. They're kind of classic. It's a classic Thompsons story, this one as well, and they dip in and out, obviously.
It's good. They feel as though they're quite well employed in this one.
They really are. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's very. It's in some points quite serious. You'd sort of think, oh, if it's about the Nazis, it's going to be quite dark and depressing. But it's very boys' own Indiana Jones. I think this one actually got compared quite a lot to Indiana Jones in later years, because it is like. It's got slapstick Nazis in it, although they're not Nazis, are they? They're fictional, but it's got some nasty pieces of work in there.
Yes, it does. And actually, in this particular book, there's not just one baddie. Anyone could be a baddie. In fact, within the various echelons of power in Syldavia, anyone could turn out to be a collaborationist and be on the side of the Borgians. So we should say at this stage then that Borgia is definitely trying to be, this is Hergé's name for Germany, essentially. Syldavia, the flag is Albania, really, because it's the pelican, isn't it?
The black pelican, yeah. And Albania apparently is the only country that has black pelicans as indigenous. So that's an interesting point. But yeah, the bad guys are everywhere. There's a network of bad guys. And I love the fact that the first guy you meet, Professor Allenbeck, it's a classic Tintin beginning. Tintin's walking along, minding his own business, and he finds a briefcase on a bench. And Snowy's like, Tintin, don't get involved in other people's business. You know what happens. But obviously, Tintin can't hear him. So he meets Professor Allenbeck, and then Professor Allenbeck seems like an eccentric, forgetful character. And then the next time you meet him, he's changed completely, and you're kind of like, okay, is he a dupe? Is he a bad guy? Is he what? And eventually turns out to be, there's a bit of a twist with who Professor Allenbeck is. And it very confuses Tintin. It's such a great start because you're like, oh, immediately there's this guy who seems very innocuous, but is he a bad guy? So yeah, Allenbeck turns out to be, there's a good one and a bad one. And or rather they've switched them out, because he's on the phone to Allenbeck and then he hears him going, help, help. And it's his brother, replacing him, which it's a nice sort of spy era switcheroo, isn't it?
And it's very Hitchcock, isn't it? I mean, the whole thing of Tintin entering the restaurant, the club restaurant, when all the baddies are sort of conspiring, and after they've been eavesdropping on Allenbeck, and he follows them to the restaurant, and they're trying to get photos with his pocket watch. So there's all these gadgets as well. So it does feel quite Hitchcockian.
I love the fact that they tried to take a picture of him with the pocket watch at the beginning, and they cut his head off in the photo, and so that's the picture they've been using the whole time to try and find Tintin. Is just his from the neck down.
Like this guy with the +4s.
Yeah, get this guy with the +4s. You can't miss him. But yeah, I love it when he goes to the restaurant and Snowy disappears at one point, and they're just like, "Oh, that was nice food. What was it?" And he goes, "Well, it was a dog's hind leg." And suddenly Tintin's like, "Snowy, Snowy." Snowy comes running out, and then they get the last laugh because Snowy's absolutely trashed the kitchen and nicked all the roast ham and stuff.
Yeah, this is one of I think this is one of Snowy's last big speaking roles. Apparently, when Haddock comes in, then Snowy is relegated to not speaking very much.
I guess Tintin is again, Tintin and Snowy have their monologues that no one else can hear, because Tintin does that Shakespearean thing where he speaks like, "Oh, he's acting very strange" in an enclosed space to the professor. It's like, well, he's not saying it to the professor, he's saying it very quietly to himself and us. So it's got that nice sort of soliloquy moment where no one can hear him, but he's going, "Ooh, what's this?" And it's like, yeah. But yeah, the car chase is good because it had an unexpected ending. That, like, he chases the car puts on first of all, he starts off on the motorbike, and the Thompsons and Snowy all fall off the back immediately. So there's good comedy there. And then he hits the car and flies into a field, but you think he's going to be on the car. The bad guys are like, this time we've really shaken him off. And then the next week when you tune in, you'd expect to see Tintin hanging off the car, but he's not. He's in the field with his stars go around his head. So it's got some nice little moments. And I think they do that very well in all Tintin books. The Tintin chasing the bad guys, and he either catches them or doesn't catch them. And there's some nice moments like Tintin flying, he gets dumped out of an aeroplane and actually finds the parachute, and then loses the parachute and ends up in a bale of hay. I mean, that's just a classic bit of war comedy, isn't it?
Yeah, I had to keep looking back at that. I thought, could he really land on a hay cart and not meet his maker? I'm not sure.
I mean, it also is a cartoon. I guess we shouldn't take it too seriously. Could a fully grown fox terrier land in the top of a parachute and float gently down to earth? I don't know.
Well, yes, we've just not been complaining about Snowy talking, so
that's true. Although I always think with Snowy, I always feel it's a little bit like Calvin and Hobbes. Obviously Snowy's real, but when he speaks out loud, it's just like you get to hear the thoughts of the dog. Yes. Like at the moment, I can hear the thoughts of my dog.
I can hear the thoughts of your dog. So we have the introduction of La Castafiore this time as well.
Yeah.
One of Hergé's few and far between female characters.
Viva la diva.
Absolutely. And she's accompanied by her pianist, Igor Wagner.
Yes.
But not yet by her maid, Irma, I don't think.
Oh, that's right, Irma, yeah. Oh, yeah. And she always sings the same song, which is... My beauty past compare, these jewels bright I wear. And every time...
The jewel song from Faust, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Every time Tintin hears it, he's like, oh, it's Bianca Castafiore.
Well, I don't know if you know, but apparently Hergé absolutely hated opera. He said, opera bores me. But he said, what's more, it makes me laugh. So he sort of torments Tintin as he's been tormented by opera, I guess.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting because, yeah, Bianca Castafiore, she's very well-meaning, and she's an opera diva, so she's very... specific caricature, but yeah, her voice can actually break crystal.
Yeah, he says that actually opera singers and insurance salesmen are his two pet peeves, so hence Jolyon Wag comes in later as well.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And we have this brilliant, in the middle of the book, we have this pamphlet for Syldavia. Yeah. It's like a tourist pamphlet, isn't it? And in the original book, apparently that was like a pull-out supplement that readers could use to study the history of Syldavia, which is just like a little book all of its own, and it just makes the whole thing very real.
Yeah, it's got a sort of Battle of Hastings.
Yeah, that's amazing. This is a 15th century kind of frieze, isn't it?
Yeah, I love it. And it's they apparently fans. The language was based on various different languages, and Hergé created a fake language basically, which was the Syldavian, and people apparently, like, with the Klingon dictionaries and stuff, people actually created a Syldavian dictionary where they made their own version of the language up, which is brilliant.
It's amazing actually, because reading around this, it seems as though he was trying to do a lot with this idea of Syldavia, because although it was based on Albania with the black pelican, he was also trying to conjure up images of lots of Balkan region countries. I think the Iron Guard in the story was supposed to be a real organization that was threatening the king of Romania at the time.
Yeah.
And then we've got, so yeah, that's the kind of Transylvania and Moldavia connection. And then we've got Ottokar is kind of almost like a Bohemian thing with the Kropov castle, and that's supposed to represent kind of Czechoslovakia and all these other countries, and the mosques as well in it is supposed to have echoes of Yugoslavia. I mean, I'm not sure how much this is true. It might be sort of writing all of this after the fact, but it seems that Hergé was trying to pull in a lot of these countries that were being threatened by Italy, that were being threatened by Germany. And we mustn't forget, of course, that Hergé's mentor, Albert Vallès, had a picture of Mussolini on his desk just sort of not 10 years before this. Strange times.
Very strange times. I think loyalties were suddenly being called into question, weren't they? And I know before the war, people were being very outspoken about Hitler and the Nazis, and obviously Britain was very outspoken about them because Britain wasn't making under any pretenses that they were supportive of Hitler. They weren't afraid to stand up, and so obviously one of the things Hitler and Goebbels says would try to quash any, as dictators do, any literature or radio or TV that would denounce the rise of the Third Reich. And here Hergé is going, well, here's my you to the you can beep that out if you like, to the here's my flip you to the Nazis. I'm publishing a book that's anti dictators, you know.
Yeah, it must have been quite brave at the time, I would have thought.
Yeah, so this is, I think, when people say that, oh, Hergé, you know, was he sympathetic and to the Nazis and stuff, like, clearly not.
And then we've got the section where apparently the Bordurian plains in the book are very much like the planes the Nazis were flying at the time, which is why it was only a very thinly veiled caricature of Germany. I think it was pretty clear to see that this was Germany that he was talking about. And Tintin has, I don't know if it's a very good idea to steal this plane and fly it back to Clov, because like Clov thing in the city, they all think that they're being attacked by the Bajurians, so they start firing on Tintin in his plane,
and he goes down in a big blaze of flames, doesn't he?
It's a lovely page, that actually. It's
it's
very beautifully drawn. That
it is beautifully drawn. Yeah, I mean, you know, aside from all of the drama in it, I love the MacGuffin of King Ottokar's Sceptre, because basically, you know, and that's why it goes to show you, it shows you the newspaper report, or rather the brochure about Syldavia, and it says, you know, that if the scepter is stolen, the person can then claim dominance to the throne. It's like, it's, you know, there is precedent for that in actual, you know, I think there's a real King Ottokar, and the scepter was actually stolen later on, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think some archaeologists uncovered a scepter back, you know, probably 30, 40 years after the book was written, and found that it belongs to a this thing that was in Prague. There was an archaeological dig at the St. Vitus Cathedral, and they turned up this scepter, which had belonged to a King Ottokar, believe it or not, who ruled in the 13th century.
Crazy. But I love, and again, Hergé's genius of tying that into, before he knew about that, tying this into World War II, beginning of World War II, the Nazis, but also the comedy of Snowy. Snowy, the way they develop this, you know, he finds a bone, and Tintin says, stop nicking old bones. And then he nicks a bone from a diplodocus, which causes this great, you know, kerfuffle in the town. Later on, he nicks a bone from a big dog, which upsets a table, which causes Tintin to escape from a bad guy. So again, Snowy saves the day. And then again, they have Snowy stealing the scepter and running off with it, and then dropping it like the bone. It's this recurring theme. And then the last thing is that there's that brilliant moment where Snowy has to choose between the bone and the scepter. And he's looking, and you can see his little doggy brain going, and and he imagines what Tintin's going to be doing if he takes back the bone. He's going to be going. So the next thing is Snowy marches into the palace holding the scepter, like.
Yeah, I mean, there's those great moments of comedy, but also Hergé is asking quite a lot of his young readers to understand what it means to have this scepter that it is then.
Yeah.
If it's stolen, then the king can't claim power, and the plot in many ways has echoes of the Blue Lotus in the kind of Japanese-Chinese standoff there, where the Japanese were having false flag operations in mainland China so they could have this excuse to invade and annex or take over parts of China. And just as here, you've got the Bordurians trying to show that they're being beaten up within Syldavia and that they're being persecuted. So again, they can come and annex the Syldavia for their own. It's quite sophisticated. Certainly I didn't pick up on all of that when I read it first time around. And we've got all of these big ideas and world affairs going on, but also Hergé manages to crowbar in at the center of this kind of locked room mystery as well, with the scepter being taken or disappearing from this ostensibly locked room.
I love the locked room mystery, and I love the way Tintin solves it, where he walks past a toy shop and he sees a cannon with a spring, and he goes, "Ooh, that gives me an idea." And that's how they did it.
He works it out, and then he gets honored by the Syldavian king. So this is him walking to meet the king, and apparently here on the right hand side we have Hergé drawing himself again. So he has a cameo there on the right hand side.
Nice. Yeah, that's nice. He looks slightly less crude than he did in his first cameo a couple of books ago, where he's quite basic looking. It actually does look like Hergé. He's still got a handsome quiff, doesn't he? And
then, as usual, the Thompsons just go and end up walking out of a plane into the water, and that's as usual. That's the way Hergé ends the book.
I love the fact that almost without too much faff, you also have an incident with the Thompson twins where you don't see the Thompsons. And so Tintin's just got this award. Everyone's going, hurrah, hurrah. And you see these two bowler hats and two canes raised into the air. One of them they both catch the chandelier. And in the next shot, the chandelier is on the floor and two bowler hats. And they're going, what on earth was that? But you know what's just happened.
And did you know that this was the first book that was, the first adventure that was seen by British audiences, because it was published serialized in The Eagle in 1951. And
brilliant.
Tintin is Tintin, but Snowy isn't Snowy yet. He's Milou, so he retains his French name. I think only Dupont and Dupont have their names translated into Thompson and Thompson. So in fact, that's a name that the next translators, Michael Turner and Leslie Lonsdale Cooper, they get to inherit Thompson and Thompson. That's one name that they didn't make up themselves.
That's right. So that's 51. So that's 70 years ago Tintin first got published in the UK.
Yeah, that's right.
Amazing. 70 years later, we're still rabbiting on about it. It must have had some impact.
Indeed. So let's award this some crystal balls from our 7 crystal balls scale. What are you going to give this one?
I'm going to give this one a 6, because I think it's again, it's not one I thought was one of my favorites, but it's really, I think it's kind of flawless. Really, I think it's really entertaining. It's got everyone at their best. I think it's Hergé at his best. I didn't think I would be giving this one a 6. I thought, it's probably a 5, that one. But as I was reading it, I was going, I can't really fault this at all. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I'm absolutely with you, my friend. I'm going to give this a 6. Again, it's just really packed. There's the comedy, the drama, the MacGuffin, the locked room mystery, the Thompsons giving it some of their best comedy. And I think it's a really ominous book that is very much of its time. There are dark forces at work. It feels quite unnerving always, because Tintin's adversaries seem to be legion, and they're unknown as well. You don't know when the next one's coming from, or even if it's someone who he thinks is a goodie.
Yeah.
So it's all pretty dark.
French resistance stuff, isn't it? You can imagine there's a sort of vibe of the French resistance, and then the double crossers of the French resistance trying to eke them out, trying to find who the enemies of the Nazis were. But yeah, isn't it great that a comic author at the outbreak of World War II is publishing something that's saying this is bad.
Yes.
We should be concerned about this. And Tintin, again, he's so incorruptible. But yeah, you can't trust anybody. So that paranoia, pre-war paranoia, which everyone must have been feeling at the time. Who do we trust? And the answer is not this lot.
Well, that brings me to my final thought. So Hergé knows that this is very topical and very important as a book. So as he's writing the story, he's speaking to his publisher, Casterman, urging them to publish the story in book form as soon as they possibly can. He tells his editor, if you've read the story at all, you'll know it's completely based on current events. Syldavia is Albania. It's preparing to be annexed. And if we want to take advantage of this topicality, it's now or never. So in May 1939, Hergé and his wife Germaine move out of central Brussels, and they move to a large house a few miles away from the city centre on the edge of a forest. And although it sounds quite idyllic, Hergé's working harder than ever, of course, and obviously the shadow of war is approaching. The serialization of this adventure ends in Le Petit 20e on the 10th of August 1939. And just 3 weeks later, on the 1st of September, Germany invades Poland, which obviously triggers the start of the World War II. The book of King Ottokar's Sceptre is released shortly after that in November. And Belgians are becoming increasingly worried about their own position, the threat to them from the Nazis. Would Germany invade Belgium too? Now, when we go on to the next books, we'll see that a lot of people start to question Hergé's actions during World War II. Did he collude with the Nazis, and was he a traitor to Belgium? And I think, as we've demonstrated, that this, I think, is Exhibit A in his defense, really. He is, to be writing this just a month before war breaks out in Europe seems a pretty brave thing to do. And he doesn't stop there, as we'll see when he starts writing his next Tintin adventure, even though war was only weeks away. So we will be discussing all of that the next time we meet on Tintincast. So I hope you can join us then. See you soon.
See you next week.